Welcome, everybody. So Kevin, if you wouldn't mind just jumping to the next slide there, I think we can get things kicked off. So my name is Jason Lindstrom. I am the CEO of Bucket List Rewards. We are the leading employee rewards and recognition program. But today, I'd love to really focus on Kevin. By way of introduction to myself, maybe if you could jump to the next slide. I've had the chance to work with everything from startups to Fortune 500s from over 40 different countries. And I've had the chance to work across all different sectors. We work with RBC Bank, which of course represents finance. We work with a ton of healthcare organizations and even some cool brands like Orlando Magic. But if we jump to the next slide, like I said, today is all about Kevin, and I'd love to take just a few moments to introduce him. Kevin Sheridan is an internationally recognized keynote speaker. He's a New York Times bestselling author and one of the most sought after voices in the world on the topic of employee engagement. For 5 years running, he's been honored on Inc. magazine's top 101 leadership speakers in the world, as well as Inc.'s top 101 experts on employee engagement. He's been named the Employee Engagement Awards Top 100 Global Influencers on Employee Engagement for 3 consecutive years. He's also been designated as a senior fellow at the conference board. And in his free time, Kevin volunteers with a variety of charities. He also enjoys golfing, fishing, and I've personally found this last one super intriguing, high altitude mountaineering. So Kevin, welcome, sir. We're super excited to have you here today and to be sharing your thoughts and wisdom in somewhat of a turbulent time. And then lastly, why are we doing this whole thing? We're on a mission to help people leaders build the best cultures possible. And that's really, I think, at the heart of what Kevin's going to be going through today, is sharing ideas, tactics, and tips that you can deploy into your organization. And of course, continue to build great cultures. And next slide.
Which I am a big believer in because I wrote about 10 years ago a book called Building a Magnetic Culture. And it's all about how do you build a culture that draws top talent in and makes it really tough for people to leave. Jason mentioned that I do high altitude mountaineering. Years ago, I began an athletic journey known as the 7 Summits. That is to climb the highest mountain on every continent. And I've actually done 5. All of the photos you see of the mountains here are from my formal expeditions. This is Mount Elbrus in Russia, which was just absolutely beautiful. Very tough climb, almost a little over 20,000 feet. When we got to the summit, we got to look down on the Russian town of Sochi, where they had the Olympics. And that guy at the top, at the beginning of our line on this Mount Elbrus, that was my Sarder, as they call them in Nepal. A Sarder is the chief Sherpa that leads the expedition up the mountain. Today, I'm going to be your Sarder. We're going to reach the summit of virtual employee engagement. What I'll be covering is what are the benefits of letting people work remotely, what are the benefits of virtual work, not only for employers, but also for the employees themselves. And we'll touch upon the single greatest mistake that companies make vis-a-vis virtual employee engagement, and that is they make the wrong hire. That's the most critical decision you need to make when bringing people in. Don't settle. Make sure that you are very scrutinizing about who you allow into your culture and into your brand and your organization. Then I'm going to show you the key drivers of keeping people engaged while working remotely. Interestingly enough, that book, Building a Magnetic Culture, and either of my books, if you do get them, you get them off my website, they'll be discounted, but more importantly, I get to sign them. And for my bestseller, Building a Magnetic Culture, I've actually signed over 43,000 copies of that book. And I do it because it's a sign of engagement, that extra effort. So I find it quite ironic and funny that people are coming to me, my friends are like, you wrote your second book 10 years ago and it was called The Virtual Manager. Were you prescient? How did you know that we'd be all working remotely and it'd be such a hot topic? Because that book is all about remote work. And as much as I like to say that I'm a soothsayer and I knew the future, that just was kind of blind luck. But that book is more applicable today than ever. And it's got a lot of the best practices on engaging virtual people. And I actually will show you in order of importance, what are the top drivers, and I'll be sharing some best practices on a couple of those key drivers. We'll also be looking at, is that a beautiful mountain? It was just a magical summit day. We began that climb at midnight, actually. And that was a 14-hour round trip day, which was exhausting. As I mentioned, I'll share the best practices. We'll talk about how to leverage technology in the virtual world. We'll talk about the thing that my company, my old company that I sold 11 years ago, HR Solutions, brought to the core, which was rewriting the script on employee engagement. Everyone was so focused on making the manager responsible for engagement that no one questioned, wait a minute, when does the employee begin to accept ownership for their own engagement? Because they're 50% of the solution. We were the first survey firm, employee survey firm, to empower the employee to discover what they can do on their own to engage themselves. Then we'll be closing with some final thoughts and takeaways. These are just some of the benefits you'll see. And by the way, we will be sending a copy of this presentation in a PDF format, so you don't have to take notes. You can just listen and read, but you'll have a full summary of what are the benefits for employers. Those are just some on the left. Obviously, reducing turnover is probably the most important one. Gallup estimates that turnover costs the American economy, North American economy, $550 billion each year. Those of you that lose your best employees know this firsthand. What are the benefits for employees? I get to be home. And you know what is really interesting? And I blogged about it. By the way, there's some pretty entertaining blogs. You know what's the magnet that keeping people returning to the office? It's Fido. It's the pet. People during the pandemic, their pet almost became a therapist. It was their personal way of getting over the emotional trauma of all this remote work and the pandemic. It's a lot less stressful to work. I also like to eradicate that old school thought that, oh, those people working from home, they're actually, out, having fun, and they're not working. One of the things that I dispelled in my book, The Virtual Manager, is that's simply not true. And those of you that have done remote work, you roll out of bed and you're right to the computer. The last thing you do before you go to bed, check your email, check your text. So the average of a person working from home puts in 4 hours more work per week than someone going into an office. Greater work-life balance, wellness. I can take a break in the middle of the day, and I live on a lagoon, and I'm averaging these days 7.5 miles walking around that lagoon here in Palm Beach Gardens. And I finally saw my first alligator. It took about a month and a half, but it was kind of fun to see an alligator, which I didn't see much of those up in Illinois where I moved from. There are cost savings to this as well. Now let's take a look. What percent of all employees who have worked remotely report that they were more productive than when they went into a company site? 33%, 81%, 23%, 93%. You are going to find the results quite revealing. 81% of all employees report that they are more productive when they work remotely. That's pretty powerful. Another interesting outcome is that 82% of the Fortune 100 best places to work have a working from home policy. It's seen as a benefit, which is fantastic. As I mentioned, 4 hours more each week than their corporate counterparts. Out of office workers are proven to be more engaged. One of my former competitors, Gallup, does a lot of great research. I don't personally, not a personal fan of their Q12 survey because it's missing a lot of things. One of the number 2 reasons why people leave the organization and resign is pay. And yet the Gallup Q12 doesn't ask anything about pay. You ask any of the recruiters out there, do you believe that working from home benefits allows you to recruit more efficiently? You betcha. they're going to say yes to that. Another poll, on average, how many times each day are workers at a company office or work site interrupted? This is fascinating. This is what I call the thief of productivity. 5 times a day? No. 12 times a day? 23 times? You got it. It's D, 60 times each day. That doesn't happen when I'm sitting here working from home, because I'm not getting constantly interrupted or going into the break room and getting a cup of coffee and asking my coworker, how was your date last night? I'm often asked, what's the key? What's the absolute key to a successful virtual worker, virtual employer relationship? Well, it reminds me of when this guy, Ronald Reagan, during the nuclear disarmament talks in Russia, or in Washington, Gorbachev was right next to him. Ronald Reagan went right to the podium and he said, I hope I don't mess this up, but Mikhail and I have come to the conclusion that we will novoprai dovovoprai. And that, of course, was trust, but verify. Reagan said it in Russian. But that's the key. That's the bedrock of a successful virtual relationship. You need to hire people that you can trust and then get out of their way. Let them focus on being very engaged and being productive. All you want to do is check in on the outcomes. Are you getting what you wanted? And I used to be that old school manager. I need to see people. No, you don't. As long as you know what metrics you want to achieve and you're monitoring them. And let's say the employee wants to go have ice cream in a local park or go fly a kite, as long as they've done what they were supposed to do, let them. This is one of the reasons why there's been such a burst of gamification. And I'm going to touch upon that towards the end of the presentation. It's like, we need more fun. Number one reason people leave, I mentioned number 2 is pay. Number 1, stress. What better antidote or medicine for stress than encouraging people to have fun in their job? We need more of it. So trust your people and get out of the way. Focus not on them, but on the outcomes that they're creating. What are the top qualities of engaged employee? Look at all these great things. They're loyal, they're self-motivated, committed to quality, they're driven by their job content. They're passionate about what they do. And I always talk about, maybe I'm passionate about doing these speeches and live events or podcasts, but I always joke, like, I know what my next career is going to be. And you know what? The pandemic drove it, because it decimated my keynote speaking business because everyone canceled their events. So I pivoted, and I used to joke that I wanted to write the lyrics to country music, because I grew up in northern Wisconsin. So when I heard a real country song called Tequila Makes Your Clothes Fall Off, I'm like, I could have written that song. So that's what I did. I wrote 6 different country music songs. Now I just need to find an artist to put the music together so I can get these songs into the hands of a Kenny Chesney, if you will. All these positive outcomes. One of the number one benefits of having engaged people is, those moments in the workplace where something goes wrong and you need a Johnny on the spot or a Mary on the spot. Those engaged people are there in a flash, which reminds me of this guy, my 11-year-old Labradoodle. I kid you not, when I lived with that dog in my house, every single time the doorbell would ring, Max was right to the door, despite the fact that not once it ever was for him. Engaged employees act in the same selfless, engaging way. These are the pie chart metrics on engagement when I wrote my bestseller. First takeaway is, wow, only 27% engaged. That seems pretty low. The most recent data I've seen from Gallup, 33% engaged. Should we throw a party? No, it just tells you how difficult it is to engage employees, and you need to roll up your sleeves and redouble your efforts. The other alarming part of this pie chart is the middle category. These are the people that are not engaged and the people that are not disengaged. They're in the middle. I don't know how many of you watched the AMC show, The Walking Dead. I became a fan. These are your working dead. They are workplace zombies. They're not going to get the extra mile. So how do you re-engage these people? First thing you can do is get them a mentor. Give them a mentor that can meet with them once a week and become a coach on engagement and to re-engage them. The other thing you can do, knowing that these 60%, they're not likely to volunteer. So you know what you do? You volunteer them. I put that in my book. That's like, Jason, you're in charge now. We expect to hear from you next week on what we can do differently for communication purposes. Glad you're on board, Jason. Now, the third takeaway for this middle category of the working dead is, and it gets back to the, doing it, are you in the right job? Half of the 60%, they're in a job that they just are not passionate about. So they need to recast themselves, or you as their manager need to say, you're in the wrong job. I'm going to recast you into a role where you're passionate about what you do. Those are the three things you can do to re-engage this very large 60%. The actively disengaged, only one solution for these people. Starts with a T. It's either transition or termination. Do not hold out any hope that you are going to get these people into the engaged category. And in fact, they are your workplace terrorists. They are openly seeking out the 60% to see how they can drag them into the malaise of disengagement. That's one more reason that underscore you got to get rid of these people. And you know who they are. Make them leave, get them out of the organization. You can do it. What does disengagement look like? Well, you'll never get to work on time. Ha, ha, ha. Who would create a sign like this? A disengaged employee. My boss told me to change this stupid sign, so I did. Would you drop by this gas station? No, you'd keep on driving. And my favorite visual image of disengagement speaks volumes into the willingness to exert extra effort in one's job. Are you kidding me? Get out of the truck and remove the log so you can paint the line the way it was meant to be painted. I did a speech several years ago. I had 600 people in my audience. I had a guy come up to me and say, "Hey, Kev, I love your log picture, but I can one-up it." I said, "What is it?" He goes, "I'll send it to you in an email." And he sent it to me. And essentially, it's my log picture, except not a log, it's roadkill. I'm like, are you kidding me? Sanitation worker just kicked the dead animal out of the way and paint the line. Is that awesome? I know that some of you are laughing quite loud right now. So, and I admitted to the guy, yep, your picture's better than mine. Here are all the great outcomes for engagement, 300% more innovation. I cite the sources here, Harvard Business Review, higher retention, higher sales by 37%, less burnout, which of course you can see how high that is. That's the stress that I talked about before. Lower absenteeism, which by the way, costs the average American employer $2,400 per employee per year. You do the math, that's significant. Much less turnover, better communication, more volunteership, which leads to higher productivity, better safety compliance. Now, my favorite example of engagement in this regard is the healthcare industry. In this case, engagement saves lives. You know, the number one reason that 350,000 people enter a hospital with a moderate health condition and leave in a body bag? The number one reason, infection. And you know why those infections occurs? Hand washing compliance. Who's going to wash their hands as a healthcare worker? Engaged employees. So in this case, your people are saving lives through their engagement. Best in class engagement, they'll make more money. That's an important metric, but I like the last one even better. There's a very high correlation between engagement and whether your customers are satisfied. Again, that's Harvard Business School. Look at what turnover does. My favorite question when I ran HR Solutions to put in our employee survey, How many of you thought of resigning in the last 6 months? And if you're coding your survey by department, you'll be able to see where your future turnover will take place. And then you can do something about it, design action plans specific to those departments to avert the engagement. I've already told you what that other was in terms of the reason why people have thought of resigning. Look at how high that is, 28% say, yeah, I've thought of resigning. Number one reason, job stress. That's what that other category is. And then, as I said before, pay is number two. And the third is the manager. We'll come back to that because the manager looks a little small to me. And the reality is great managers are going to the green part of this chart and saying, Jason, I want to reduce your job stress. So that's up to the manager. Great managers are saying, Jason, I just did a salary survey and I discovered that you're being underpaid. I'm going to make this right. I'll talk to our comp people and your increase. You're going to get a raise. You didn't even know that when you entered this webinar, did you, Jason? Of course, you're the CEO, so you can give yourself that raise, okay?
I'm never opposed to a good raise, Kevin.
I love it.
This is one of my key takeaways from today. Thank you.
And then, of course, you have the flip side of engagement being disengagement. Look at the cost. If you lose a customer, you're going to have to spend 5 times more money to get a new replacement customer. And then you create a happy customer, they become your marketers. They'll tell on average 5 other people about your great brand at bucket list. So you're going to get new clients from your happy customers. 5 other people learn about the compliment. Conversely, you have 1 disengaged customers that's left unhappy. They will tell 10 other people who will in turn tell 5 other people. You do the math. You're up to 60 people that learned of the complaint. Multiply that times your average sale per year. That's a lot of money. Most companies, millions of dollars. You can just see how costly disengagement would be. Now, I featured this in my book, The Virtual Manager. What are the S qualities about hiring right? Well, your people that are going to be the best virtual workers, they're going to be self-starters, they'll be self-motivated, self-disciplined, self-sufficient, and skilled and highly adaptive communicators. You will also question mark what attracted this person to your company, and then you'll amplify that during that person's career at your organization. Find out what the original magnet was and give them more of that. Keep feeding it. That's a best practice of one of my former clients, Starwood Hotels. Onboarding. Make sure you do both on-site and remote onboarding. Let them meet their coworkers if you're having company events, or let them participate. Yes, it'll cost you a little more money, but you'll be saving that money by having a much less turnover. Get feedback early and often. Do that new hire survey that finds out, what's the first 90 days? What did it look like? What went right? What went wrong? And again, you're going to get your payback by averting turnover. I promised you the key drivers of employees' engagement for virtual workers. Here they are in order of importance. We're going to touch upon the top, really the top 3. Recognition is indeed shown over and over again that it is a powerful driver of engagement. The power of thank you. Oh, I did a blog about that. It is exceptionally powerful. But a lot of companies, they say thank you, but they're not figuring out how do employees want to be thanked. I had this illuminated for me when, time and time again at my staff meetings at HR Solutions, I'd give shout outs. Hey, Nicole did a great job on that. Good job, Nicole. Everybody clap. And then one day Nicole came to me and she goes, Kevin, I know you mean well, but publicly recognizing me, but I kind of get embarrassed. And I thought, oh my God, I've just been embarrassing her that whole time. I said, I get it. Not all people want those public shout outs. And from then on, I just privately said, good job, Nicole, and made sure Nicole's boss knew that she was doing great, great work, so he or she could recognize her. Get senior leaders involved in your recognition efforts. Encourage coworker recognition. It's really powerful. Pandora does a great job with this. They actually have a ticker tape, like a New York stock ticker tape, to give shout outs to those people that want that public recognition. Very powerful. Now, I have a video that I'm going to show, I'm not going to show it to you, but I want you after this webinar to go to it. It's an awesome video and it just illuminates the power of peer recognition. We'll come to that in a minute. One of the great management gurus out there highlighted the fact that recognition needs to be consistent. And Zig Ziglar said, people often say that motivation does not last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it on a daily basis. I love that quote. So I've told you how important it is to say thank you and recognize. Now I want to show you the 3 things that are the most powerful things that takes it from a thank you to something that's memorable and powerful. Let's say Jason just did a great job putting this webinar together, which you did. First thing I'm going to do is say, Jason, I noticed what you did. The way you set this webinar up was fantastic. Now I want to explain to you, Jason, why what you did is so intrinsically important to this organization. Now, when I do that, Jason's going to put that in his head. He's like, I want to do that again. He's going to replicate that behavior. And my last step to making this the most powerful way of recognizing Jason, here is a gift certificate to your local Italian restaurant. I want you to take your family to dinner tonight. Give something tangible back, always. It will make it even more memorable. This is the video. You'll find it on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and search trick shot Titus, 3-foot Channing Tatum and Bradley Cooper, they're featured in the video. It is awesome. And you can share it with your team to underscore just how powerful recognition is. I'm going to give you some ideas for recognizing virtual workers, and I'm going to give you some not good ideas that should not be used to recognize remote workers. First one, send e-cards. Nominate remote workers for rewards. Make FaceTime. It's so critical. Do those Zoom calls. Personally hand out paychecks while thanking employees for their efforts, and make a conscious effort to sprinkle recognition and praise into emails. It is powerful. What you should not use as recognition tools, here you go. Those are just some of the things, everybody gets the holiday turkey. So it kind of dilutes the effect of how powerful that is. Recognizing people's birthdays, it's just going to come as a normal part of work. Casual dress. Well, now we're all casual. I actually dressed up for this webinar. Normally I'm in a raggy Michael Jordan t-shirt. So these are things you don't want to be relying on for recognition. I'm often asked, what's the one thing? Remember this movie, City Slickers? That's Curly, played by Jack Palance. And at one point, Billy Crystal said, what's the secret to life? And he goes, there's just one thing. And then he doesn't tell Billy Crystal. He goes, you need to figure that out with yourself. And with the help of his cow, Norman, he figures it out. Well, the one thing with virtual engagement, it's the manager, as I inferred before. Great managers will be accountable. They'll genuinely care about their people, not as cogs on the wheel of productivity, but as human beings. They'll actually care about them as human beings. They'll clearly communicate, this is what I expect of you, Jason, and then they'll measure it. They'll measure those outcomes. They will also use the 3 most impactful workplace phrases, which I've blogged about. Thank you being one of them. Great job, recognition. I'm sorry, and actually I guess there are 4, and I don't know. I don't know. You know how many managers are afraid to say, I don't know? Well, it's silly. That's how we learn. And learning is a key to engagement. What are the best practices? Regular performance discussion, regular feedback. It's like, going on a diet one day out of the year doesn't work. It needs to be regularly revisited. Engage employees about their engagement. How many performance reviews actually have a section asking employees, when you are most engaged in your job, what got you there? And then keep feeding them that. A lot of performance reviews don't cover that. Another great exercise, which I love, is I call it the best boss exercise. Ask yourself, attendees, who was your best boss? And then write down the 3 qualities that made that boss the best boss of your life and then say, I want to be that boss for my employees. Best boss exercise, excellent exercise. Job content is critical to engagement. One of my favorite quotes that's at the beginning of the job content chapter in my bestseller, never try to teach a pig to sing. It wastes your time and it annoys the pig. How true is that? Why are we looking at a septic tank? Because I actually had to work in a septic tank. Every day on the job is not going to be a walk in the park. And I thought of my 91-year-old grandmother, Rita, on my mom's side. She, like any good Irish grandmother, at 5 to 5, she'd turn to her watch and say, Kevin, pour me a scotch. I know you're only 16 years old. Go ahead and pour yourself a scotch. Then we'd have our little happy hour. And had it not been for her great infinite wisdom during one of our first happy hours, I never would have made it work. Through this work of working in a septic tank where you know what was literally falling on my head. And that catchphrase was, keep moving. And I had to keep moving that week. When you're having a tough week, momentum is your best friend. Keep moving. That's my sweet redheaded Rita Graham. Yeah, what a lady. Culture was featured as the word of the year by Merriam-Webster. It came out the same year as my Building a Magnetic Culture book. Thank you very much. Probably one of the main reasons it hit 6 of the bestseller lists. And then, of course, when you get the moniker New York Times bestselling author, people say, we want you to speak at our conference. So that opened up a whole new career for me, which thank goodness is coming back. I just gave a speech in Huntsville, Alabama, a couple of weeks ago, and it just felt so good to take the stage again and see an audience and get a standing ovation. It's what I miss. And so I'm glad it's coming back. What's culture? Core values, mission, pride, passion, workplace flexibility, D&I, which, having grown up on an American Indian reservation, yeah, I had to go to a tribal grade school where I got beat up every day because of my white skin. Not a victim here. That was a gift. As a white male, to know what it's like to be a minority as a Chippewa Indian tribe, what a gift. And I learned Chippewa. I actually, don't laugh too hard, Jason, I used to dance in the powwow. So it's about adaptability, adapting to that culture. And my favorite is fun. We need more fun in the workplace. One of my favorite clients of all time was the Radio Fire Corporation. They are all about fun. You know, are they known for making a really great red wagon? Yeah. Is that their mission? No. You know what their mission is? To make people smile. So when I went into an HR event and I had them as a client, I never met the head of HR, Amy Bustega, until this SHRM event in Chicago. And I saw her name tag. I said, Amy, I'm Kevin Sheridan, CEO of HR Solutions. And I handed her my relatively boring business card. She dug into her purse. That's what she gave me. Is that awesome? That's actually her in a little red wagon. We need more of this. We need more of this. And you could see their little red, they want to make people smile. She had me within 5 seconds. Not only did I smile, I laughed. And, you know, their October radio flyer, you can dress up for Halloween. Bless you, Jason. You can dress up at Halloween every day of October. Their CEO is not a CEO, it's a CWO. Yeah, Chief Wagon Officer. Their employees aren't employees, they're flyers. Is that awesome? So I'm a big proponent of fun. And which is why when I walked into one of my groups, I do focus groups too. And on the heels of an employee survey, I can tease out the qualitative, which explains why the numbers from the employee survey showed up the way they did. I walked into a break room and I saw on the ubiquitous workplace refrigerator, somebody had put a note up, which I thought was hysterical. It said, there's a new workplace trend going on. People are actually naming the food they put in the company fridge. I just ate a tuna sandwich named Kevin. No, you just stole someone's lunch. Is that awesome? I laughed so hard. We need more of this. This is something that one of my marketing people created, Christina. This is a person that created a personal fact sheet. And so in our break room, we had a personal fact sheet for every single employee at HR Solutions. When did they start? What's their hometown? Where do they currently live? Oh, you watch 30 Rock. So, so next time I ran into Christina, I said, yeah, I want to see the Jack Black eyebrow roll. That's the little trivia fun fact. Why not? Take this plate. You won't be plagiarizing it. Make these up for all your team members and put it in the break rooms. It's a great way to know each other, because on the top 10 list of drivers is coworker satisfaction and coworker engagement. Very, very powerful. Create a workplace happiness video. Why not? And when you create that video, get your senior leaders to participate in there as well. It's awesome. And what a great way of, again, reducing stress than creating a workplace video. Use it during your recruiting efforts. People are going to be like, I want to work there. It looks like they've been having fun there. Here's just some great ideas for you can have better remote meetings, create better agendas, be sensitive to time zones, clearly define the topics that are going to be discussed, explain why the topic is so important that it deserves to be on the agenda, articulate exactly what you hope to be accomplished during that remote meeting, and only include the right people in remote meetings. You know how many people complain about having to attend a webinar or a podcast or a virtual meeting? It's, why am I here? It's like one of the biggest criticisms. And expect and demand that the meetings start on time. I was a stickler about this when I ran HR Solutions. If you were 10 seconds late for a meeting, not let into the meeting. Do that once or twice and everyone will show up on time, believe me. How do you leverage technology in the virtual world? Your Gen Xers and your Gen Yers, your millennials, they absolutely demand it. They live with the technology. As I mentioned before, encourage gamification, let people play computer games remotely. Establish the right what I call remote architecture. You got people who are working remotely. Did you check in on their architecture? Do you have the right desk? Is your, the right seating so you're not hurting your back? The right computer or the conference access or dial-ins, phone. And then also you need to think through what are the legal ramifications of retrieving both the technology that you provide your remote worker and the data within it. You need to make sure you have the right legal agreements so that that person is legally responsible for returning all that proprietary technology and data, if you will. Now, if anything I'm very proud of in my career, we ran that employee survey and it was all about the manager. Give the results back to the manager and demand that they put together meaningful action plans to re-engage their employees. Well, guess who was left out of the solution? The employees themselves. It was extremely lopsided. And I had one of my best companies, clients, a healthcare company, because half of our work was for hospitals and health systems. This was a health system in New Jersey called AtlantiCare. Yeah, you guessed it, right near Atlantic City. And their head of HR said, Kevin, I love your HR Solutions Suite 16 survey, but something's missing. Why is it always up to the manager? And you really don't have a solution to engage the employee. And rather than viewing Rick's comment as a complaint, I listened. Next time one of your customers complains, truly listen. Don't discount them as complaining because this guy gave me a gift. And I went back to my team. I said, we haven't empowered the employee to own their own engagement. That's when we created PEER, the personal employee engagement survey. My old company that I sold it to, they took it down. So I worked with a company called Modern Survey to create a link that I think is still active, where you can answer a series of questions confidentially and get a report that not only shows you how engaged you are, but also gives you ideas on what you could do to own your own engagement, improve your own engagement. If you're an employee, also, set yourself up for recognition. Ask your boss, how am I doing? what am I doing well? And, what's my next step in terms of my career here and how can I get there? Get yourself involved. When your senior leaders are having brown bag lunches or virtual meetings, sign up, participate, ask for and act on feedback, and then regularly check in with yourself by taking this self survey. My research uncovered that only 5% of performance reviews have a dialogue about engagement. Something terribly wrong about that. That should be at 100%. Make sure your regular forms and performance review includes that. What are the key takeaways? Don't underestimate the value of virtual workers. Hire right, then trust, and let go. Utilize the 4 self qualities when hiring remote workers, and you'll get a copy of this presentation as a reminder. My book, The Virtual Manager, goes in great detail on those best practices for each of the self qualities when making the right hire. Leverage the aforementioned drivers of engagement in order of importance and set up the right remote architecture as I previously mentioned. And then give the people the freedom to succeed and let go. How wonderful is that? Now, the ultimate irony about me writing The Virtual Manager is I was scheduled to climb this mountain, the Matterhorn in Zermatt. And I had spent so much time working on my bestseller that I was about 6 weeks out from the due date on The Virtual Manager with Career Press, my publisher. And I'm like, there's no way I can get this done, particularly if I want to climb the Matterhorn. So I called Career Press. I said, I'm running a little behind. Could you give me an extra month or something? And they said, Mr. Sheridan, you signed a contract. We paid you in advance. The book is due on September 15th. And so did I climb? Yeah, I got up at 4 in the morning. I was on these beautiful trails around the Matterhorn with a pad of paper and a pen. And while I was climbing, I would write the chapter. And I'd come back to Zermatt and I'd set my computer up and I'd write that chapter, shoot it via email to Chicago, where my editor would then edit it. And so the irony is The Virtual Manager was written virtually all the way in Switzerland, which is pretty awesome. And if you've never been to Zermatt, what a place. This was my first 7 summit with my great guide, Sierra. Sierra was this Tanzanian man that helped us out, got us to the peak of Kilimanjaro, which is 19,740 feet. And I made the summit. It was absolutely freezing, but I can't even begin to tell you how beautiful it was to be standing 10,000 feet above the clouds and watching the sun come up and burning those clouds off and opening up, much like an opera curtain, to looking out at the flattest plains in the world, the Serengeti Plains. I'm a big networker. I'm at the max of LinkedIn contacts, but if you want to get linked, feel free to send me a link. I'm at 30,000, but I'll make room for you. I'm also the big Facebook user. I'm up at the max of 5,000 for them. I encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. You can send me an email and check my blogs out. It's got a lot of best practices. There's a lot of free resources on my website. Go to the section named Resources and download as much as you want. There's a lot of great stuff on there. I'd like to, at this point, Jason, open it up for questions.
Wonderful, Kevin. That was awesome. So thank you, sir. I getting to know you a little bit prior to this event. I knew we'd be in store for some great stories, but I wrote down a ton of takeaways, and there were a bunch of questions that came in, and I'll jump into those in a moment. Using the chat window again, I know that a lot of people are enjoying the session. Maybe just write your favorite takeaway from today's session into the chat window, and then we'll jump over to the comments. For example, some of the things that I heard is the best boss exercise, asking yourself who was your best boss, what 3 qualities did they have. I also love the idea of when you mentioned earlier, Kevin, determining the original magnet for your best workers, and then of course repeating that. So many good takeaways, and I can see the audience is now using the chat window. Incredible webinar. That's from Anna. Thank you so much, Kevin. John Miller wrote, trust but verify. Absolutely. Mark said employee profiles.
John needs to learn how to say that in Russian.
Teresa Betty said, hire employees you can trust and let them do their job. Anna Wall, I love the personal fact sheet and the workplace happiness video, on and on. So Kevin, awesome. In the spirit of recognition, awesome job. Thank you so much. And before we jump into all the questions, I had one question for all the attendees today. So Kevin, if you could jump to the next slide. So something you had mentioned is that one of the number one drivers for employee engagement was recognition. So I'm going to put on my CEO hat and see if anybody's interested in learning more about bucket list rewards. So as I mentioned earlier, we are the number one ranked employee rewards and recognition program. We're working with hundreds of remote companies all across different sectors, from finance, tech, manufacturing, retail. But I'll pop up on screen. If you're interested in learning more about bucket lists, just click yes into the poll window. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a survey. So up on screen, you should see the survey. Would you like to learn more about bucket list rewards? If you're interested, we'd be happy to provide you with a customized demo and show you how this whole thing can work. And I'll give that just a few more seconds to run, and then we're going to pivot and we're going to open it up to normal Q&A.
And then towards the end of the Q&A, I had one other tidbit from my gram that I wanted to share with the audience, which is quite entertaining.
Excellent. Awesome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. And thank you very much, everybody, for answering. And you can either jump to the tidbit, or if you want to go down to that HRCI credit slide, and maybe we can leave that up on screen as we go through some of the questions. There we go. Great. All righty. So I saw a bunch of questions come in, and I'm going to jump into those now. So the first question is from Scott Duncan. And he said that with the recent news that millions of Americans have quit in August, how can you prevent people, have quit in August because of pandemic burnout? How can you prevent people leaving, or how can you engage them? So that's your first question, Kevin.
Can you repeat that again?
Absolutely. So what Scott had said was that there's actually 4.3 million Americans quit in August due to pandemic burnout.
Yes.
And his question for you is, how can you prevent people from leaving, or how do you engage them? What would be some of your top tips?
Well, what's interesting is, if this is the Scott Duncan that I knew as a young man, he was my first friend that lived across the street from me in Deerfield, Illinois. So if that's you, Scott, hello, I called you yesterday just to reconnect. Basically, what you want to do is, obviously, being the former CEO of a survey company, I have a fervent belief in the value of doing regular employee surveys, but also regular exit surveys. So if you're not doing exit surveys, you don't have a handle on why people are leaving. And because you don't have a handle on it, you can't act on it, design action plans to prevent that future turnover. In your employee surveys, you could be proactive and ask that question that I had in my presentation of, have you thought of resigning? Now, you're ahead of the curve on that. So you'll know before they quit, what are the most likely reasons people could quit. And again, you'll design action plans around them. You want to have an action plan for all top 10 of those drivers on the list that I presented, the drivers of engagement for virtual workers. A lot of companies are haphazard. You also want to use I'm a big believer in LinkedIn. Obviously, I'm maxed out in the number of groups that I'm part of, but I regularly go out to those groups and ask for the best practices. I get a lot of new ideas. I also recommend that you listen to other experts. You know, I don't, it's interesting. It's, you know, a lot of people, when they get into the speaking business, they start viewing their fellow speakers as competitors. No. You can learn a lot from them. So, and I one of the things that has made me a successful keynote speaker is that, you know, last year prior to the pandemic, and I do regular measurement, you know, at the end of every webinar, people are asked, would you recommend Kevin Sheridan as a speaker for your future conferences? Well, last year, my net promoter score to that question was 97.5%. Now, a lot of people are saying, wow, is he bragging? Is like, that's incredible. I don't look at that 97.5% and say I'm a rock star. I look at it and say, what happened with the 2.5%? Great speakers hold themselves to a higher standard. I will never be done learning. I'll never be done trying to be the best speaker that's out there. And I also have great friendly relationships with fellow speakers because we can help each other and we can learn from each other.
And to that exact point, Kevin, you were referred to me. So there's an example referral by another speaker, thought leader, Dr. Bob Nelson. So just case in point that another speaker referred you to us. And sure enough, it's been an amazing experience getting to know you and having you present today.
That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So next question. This is from Clifford Jacobs. So nobody likes when their payer benefits are messed with, especially when it's not their favor. Some people even believe that they're being cheated. What are your thoughts about approaching this when it comes to HR?
Well, much like the example that I gave on pay and the importance of doing regular salary surveys, I mean, I won't even call it a best practice. That's like, 101. That should be on everyone's list, and yet not all companies are doing annual surveys. There's no way that you're treating your people favorably. As it relates to benefits, same thing. Do a benefits survey, which is looking at your main competitors. Who are you competing with for these workers and figuring out what benefits are they offering that maybe you're not? Are your benefits competitive? And if they're not, you need to engage your CFO and saying, we need to put more money into these benefits efforts, because if we don't, we'll suffer the cost of turnover. That's how I'd address it.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Sidebar, you said earlier, if that's you felt like you knew Scott Duncan, and it sounds like it indeed was a Scott Duncan. What he wrote in the comments window was, I can tell stories about Kevin before his preteen. So I think Scott might have some funny, maybe a little bit embarrassing stories that we'll share another time, not in today's webinar.
I love it.
Awesome. Here's a good question. This one's from Arlene. The number one reason people leave has generally been accepted as a supervisor, meaning employees leave their boss, not their organization. And then she wrote, where do we get the data to shift this to stress and pay? So I think in context, or maybe when this question popped up, you're mentioning one of the reasons people leave is due to stress and pay, which sounds like it might be more of a common theme, or maybe even a bigger driver than supervisor.
Well, like I mentioned, when I had that pie chart up that showed other, which was the stress, and then pay is the number 2 reason for people leaving, and 3, the manager. As I said before, the top 2 reasons are the manager, because great managers are ensuring that they're holding on to their best people, preventing turnover, and they're making sure that their people are not only paid fairly, but maybe even above market. I believe great organizations were top 40% in terms of the pay scale.
Awesome. And then last question, because I want to be really respectful of people's times. This one came from Elizabeth. She had mentioned that there's tons of great takeaways from today's session. And she flagged a couple of different ones, but what she had said, and this is a great way to end today's sessions, I think. She said, what is it that you want our biggest takeaway to be from today's session? So Kevin, what are your top picks from your own information?
I think it's the manager. It's all about the manager. And, a lot of, again, like the right hire that I mentioned before, hiring the right managers is 3 times more important than hiring line level employees. So make sure you're even more scrutinizing when hiring for the manager position. That would be the top one. And then ensuring that you have an action plan for all top 10 drivers that were on that list. It'll be in the presentation that I gave you.